so you can ask all your questions. Dr. Miller, one of the teachers here at Madonna, has offered to sell her book that she has authored, and a certain proceed of this book will be donated back to the club. So if you're interested in that book, I'm sure it's great. I haven't read it yet, but I'm hoping to. So I suggest checking that out. And then also, we've had some students request that we record this evening, so we are going to be recording. And if that's going to bother you or anything, just let us know. You will not be videotaped. Don't worry, but yeah. Anyway, so without further ado, here's Trevor.
All right, hi everyone. I'm going to try to avoid, I can't stay behind the podium, so I'm going to try avoiding the microphone. If you cannot hear me, feel free to wave your arms around. If you can't hear me, just assume that I'm saying something really smart and intellectual, and just nod your head, yes, I agree. And if you guys ask questions throughout the event, if you're struggling to hear the questions that are being asked, I'll repeat them as well, so hopefully everyone can hear. I'm really excited about this event. We've done it several times in the past couple months, and over the past few years, we've probably been to 30 or 40 campuses bringing the Stump the Pro-Lifer event. And the reason why we started doing it was a few years ago, we were thinking about the pro-life message and how people talk about abortion. And how so often people are so afraid to talk about it because we're so afraid that it's going to devolve into this name-calling or bumper sticker slogan or some sort of just fight that no one really wants to be a part of a fight, right? So we avoid the subject and we don't engage our community regardless of what issue you might be on. It's the taboo topic. You don't want to talk about it for the most part. But I don't think it has to be that way. I'm not saying that we need to take the passion or that we can take the passion out of the issue. Regardless of the side, what side of the issue you're on, this is an issue that matters. This is probably the most important issue that matters right now in this generation. And you should be passionate about it. It should be something that you're emotional about. But we can still have an intellectual, reasoned, respectful conversation about the abortion issue. And I think that this event's a really good way for us to model that and practice that. So, Stump the Pro-Lifer event, I'm just going to start real quick with a couple of objectives. We're going to go over quick ground rules. It's like kindergarten time, I know, but we got to do it. I'm not going to briefly, super briefly, talk about the pro-life position. I'm not going to spend too much time explaining the pro-life position. I'm not going to go too much in depth because honestly, I want you guys to guide the discussion. I want you guys to bring the challenges, the questions, the concerns, the issues you have to this discussion, and we'll let that guide the route we take. I'll open it up so that you can bring those questions, and then throughout this event, I'm hoping that we can model positive dialogue. Before we go into the ground rules, I do want to talk a little bit about the stakes. What's at stake in this issue? I think, in college, I was in college, went to Michigan State, so I kind of understand this. There's this temptation to take these really interesting topics, human rights issues, or history, or politics, and we love talking about them. We love going to class, we love having discussions and debates about this issue, but sometimes that's where it really ends. We chit-chat about the current event. We chit-chat about the injustice we heard about, or the one that we studied that occurred 100 or 200 or 300 years ago somewhere else, and we talk about it and we say, oh, that's terrible. And then we go on with our lives, and we graduate, and we go on and we live regular lives and work, and have a family, whatever. I don't think this is one of those issues that we can have that kind of attitude about. I love having philosophical conversations. I love debating and arguing respectfully, obviously, but this is a big issue, and it can't end with that. And the reason why is because there's no situation where I'm right and the pro-choice movement is right as well. Either I'm wrong or they're wrong. Because one of us is saying abortion is objectively and morally wrong, and one of us is saying it is not. For whatever reason, it's not what I'm claiming it is. And I can't be right if they're right. And they can't be right if I'm right. And the stakes are either, if I'm right, then lives are being lost on literally an unprecedented scale. Over 1 million a year are being lost. Lives, innocent lives, are being lost. If I'm right. Biggest human rights injustice of our time. If I'm wrong, though, if abortion is not objectively, morally wrong, and it should be okay, then what I'm doing is I am actively, and hopefully persuasively, arguing to strip human rights away from women. It's like trying to argue that women shouldn't be able to get their hair cut or clip their fingernails, right? There's nothing objectively, morally wrong about that. But if I'm wrong about abortion, then that's what I'm arguing they should not be able to do. Right? So either on one hand, I'm right, and innocent people are dying, and we should care. Or on the other hand, I'm wrong, and there's a large group of Americans and people around the world that are trying to strip human rights away from women around this nation. Either way, something big is happening. Something dangerous is out there, and we need to figure out who's right in this issue. And it's not something that can be just chit-chatted about in class and never thought about again. It's something that should impact the way that we live, the way that we think, the way that we talk to our friends, the way that we talk to our family and our communities and our churches. It should impact all parts of our lives in some way, different degrees, and in different ways. So the stakes are enormous. Because of the stakes, it's easy to get into a debate that is not always productive. So I do want to cover just a couple of simple ground rules. Throughout this event, I'm just going to turn it over to you guys and let you guys guide the discussion. So, you'll just raise your hand. I'll call on you. If you look like you're really smart and might challenge me, I'm probably going to skip you and I'll go for the easier one. No, I'll call on you. I'm not, I really believe that I can defend this view, so I'll call on you. And then at that point, you'll ask either your question, you want to learn something, what I believe, what I think about this certain situation or circumstance, or you want to embarrass me and make me look foolish and leave me out of the room in shame because I can't respond to this challenge that you have and you really do end up stumping me, right? That's the goal of the whole event, to stump me, right? It's called Stump the Pro-Lifer. So you might agree with me on most or all of what I say. So maybe you'll play devil's advocate today a little bit and put on a hat that you might have heard someone else claim that abortion should be okay because of X, Y, and Z reasons. Maybe you'll make that argument kind of as devil's advocate. Maybe you've heard a question from somebody or a challenge from somebody and you didn't really know how to answer it, and you want to see how I would approach it. That'd be welcome as well. Or maybe you're kind of on the fence. You're pro-life, but you're not really sure about this one example, or this one thing that makes you question that, or this exception, or this circumstance, or how to respond to this one part of the pro-life position. So, I'll call on you, you'll raise your question, challenge, or example. I won't interrupt you as you raise that, and then I ask that you don't interrupt me as I respond. If I don't quite answer what you were trying to say, we kind of have a little bit of a back and forth, but I don't want any one person to, control the whole event, so I might intentionally try to move on to other people, but I will hang out for a little while afterwards if I didn't answer your question sufficiently so you can come up and talk to me. I do ask that we're just respectful of each other, so be respectful of the people that are asking the question. We don't necessarily know their background or their experience with this issue, so we want to be really careful. I'm going to try to be really careful as well in the way that I respond to these questions. I do ask that you be respectful of me, but if you're going to disrespect somebody, it's me, because I decided to stand up here in front of all of you anyway, so I'm taking that risk, right? But I do get embarrassed, all these videos are being deleted. Okay. The pro-life position. So typically, I think a lot of people overcomplicate this issue. Not that it isn't complicated in a sense, but in another sense, it is a pretty simple position that I hold. And this simple position doesn't cover every circumstance completely. There are other things that we bring in, other examples and arguments that we bring in, but it's a pretty good umbrella for the pro-life movement, one that's pretty unified. And the pro-life position comes down to a pretty simple syllogism. The first premise is that it is wrong to intentionally take the life of an innocent human being. It is wrong to intentionally kill an innocent person. So, hopefully we all agree with that. It's wrong to murder people, right? We're all good, we're all on the same page. There's one guy that's shaking his head. Do you not agree? No, I was kidding. No, it's wrong to kill people, right? Okay, so there's not much disagreement on that. Some people might dispute that. They typically are frowned upon in society and end up locked up or something. So I don't think I need to spend too much time defending point 1, that's wrong to murder. Point 2, premise 2 is elective abortion intentionally takes the life of an innocent human being. There's the conflict, right? There's the controversy. There's the disagreement. Abortion takes the life of an innocent human being. Now, if point 2 is true, and we all have already agreed on point 1, then if it's true, what's the necessary conclusion? If it's wrong to intentionally kill people, and abortion intentionally kills a person, abortion must be wrong, right? Objectively, morally wrong. But if it's wrong to intentionally kill people, and abortion doesn't do that, either it factually doesn't do it, or there's some circumstance or some other piece of evidence that I'm missing, then abortion is not wrong. And it's no different than getting your haircut, looking your fingernails, right? Human cells might die, but it's not the same thing. So, if we're talking about abortion, then premise 2 really is the issue. Premise 2 is the argument, and that's what our task is going to be. It's going to be focused on premise 2. My job as a pro-life apologist, meaning defending my pro-life view, is to defend premise 2. Abortion intentionally takes the life of an innocent person. All of your jobs, whether you're playing devil's advocate or you really hate everything I'm going to say from here on out, is to attack premise 2. Abortion does not do that thing that you're claiming it does, Trevor. Here's why. Here's the example. Here's the logic. Here's the science. Here's the philosophy. Whatever it might be, here's why you're wrong on premise 2. And if you're wrong on premise 2, then abortion must be okay, at least in whatever circumstance or to whatever degree that we decide. So that's going to be our task. So I'm going to turn it over now to all of you and let you guys guide the discussion. So like I said, I'm going to let you guys pick what topics we focus on. I'm going to try to defend my view as best as possible. If I do get stumped, if I'm wrong on this issue, I'm willing to change my position because I've done it before. I was pro-choice. I'm now convinced that I was wrong then, I'm right now. But that doesn't mean that I know everything, so I'm open to changing my position. I would ask the same of you. So I want everyone to come in this with an open mind and say, I'm willing to follow where the truth goes, and I'm willing to follow where the science, where the logic goes, and I'm willing to commit to that truth. So, I'm going to let you guys lead from here. Who wants to open up with the first question or objection? Yeah.
I mostly hear about pro-life from religious people.
Okay.
So I want to ask an argument I've heard from pro-lifers quite often.
Okay.
Basically, life starts with a sperm and egg, right?
Yep.
Does that mean, how do I phrase this? Does that mean those individual things count as sacred life?
Yeah. So that's a really good question. So essentially the question comes down to when does life begin, right? Does life begin at conception, meaning at the formation of a zygote? Sperm and egg come together, they cease to exist individually, they form a zygote, single cell organism. Or maybe at the same time, maybe it's not or, maybe it's and, is there any intrinsic value to the sperm and egg prior to that union, right?
Yeah, that's pretty much what I mean.
Yeah, excellent. So, the kind of the crux of this, and people say this all. People sometimes use this as an argument to say, if the zygote, if abortion's wrong, then all these sperm or whatever, anything, all those things are the same thing as a zygote. And you're really trying to overcomplicate or overvalue this zygote thing. Because you don't really think that we should be protecting sperm and eggs and everything the same that we should be protecting a zygote. So I think what that comes down to, though, is that there's a confusion between parts and whole. And I'm not saying that the sperm and egg are not human cells, but I'm saying that they are not human organisms. And there's a value difference there. Meaning, if I pluck the skin on the back of my hand, I've just killed, I don't know how many cells I would have killed, but if I pluck my back of my hand, skin cells could come off, and now they plummet to their death and they're dead, right? The human cells are now dead. Did I just kill a human being when I did that right in front of you all? Did I just kill 100 human beings in front of you all? No, right? Because human cells by themselves are not human organisms. An organism is a self-directed being that develops itself from within without outside construction, right? It's whole. Whereas a human cell, skin cell, tissue cell, anything, a brain cell, anything like that, they're not human organisms. They're not self-directed, complete beings. So they have different value. So at the moment of conception, that's when a new human organism begins to exist. Prior to that, that human organism did not exist. Not in the scientific way, or an observable way. You talk about religion and stuff like that. People, you can bring religion into it. There's different considerations in that as well. Obviously, I recognize that and I respect that. But scientifically, when does the human organism begin? It's at the moment of conception, when the sperm egg ceases to exist and the zygote begins to exist. And I don't think that's disputed significantly in this debate, except by people that might have seen a convincing bumper sticker, or people that haven't really investigated too deeply the science behind embryology. Because if they have, even the most pro-choice people, most pro-choice philosophers and scientists don't dispute that abortion is the act of taking the life of a genetically unique, complete, whole human organism, right? So I'm thinking of like Peter Singer or David Boonen, these pro-choice philosophers, radically pro-choice, very far from even the pro-choice movement, to the point that advocating even for post-birth abortion, which seems odd, right? But they don't dispute this fact. They say, scientifically, undisputably, from the moment of conception, new human organisms has begun to exist. I do want to read real quick, and I don't want to misquote someone, so I'm just going to read it. What Peter Singer actually says. So Peter Singer, he's a philosopher at Princeton, and he's a very articulate, very intelligent man, very wrong on a lot of things, but smart, and he's a very widely referenced voice for the pro-choice movement, scholarly voice. And he says, quote, "It is possible to give human being, in quotes, a precise meaning. We can use it as equivalent to member of the species Homo sapiens. Whether a being is a member of a given species is something that can be determined scientifically by an examination of the nature of the chromosomes of the cells of the living organism. In this sense, there is no doubt, from the very first moments of its existence, an embryo conceived from human sperm and human eggs is a human being." So you see, that's from a radically pro-choice individual. That's his Practical Ethics book that quote is taken from. But there's no doubt in his mind what he's arguing for, in that abortion should be legal, and abortion takes the life of a human organism after it's begun. From the moment of conception, that human organism has begun to exist. So that's the science that I think I would say. I don't think that it means that sperm and egg by themselves have no value. I think that there's value that is given differently by different religions and things like that. But in terms of value that is scientific and value that is equivalent to all of our value, it begins at the moment that they cease to exist and the zygote begins to exist. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Does that answer your question? Okay. Excellent. What else do you guys have? I'll start calling on people. A lot of people in this room. No one has one? I convinced everybody. Go for it.
Why I would ask, what about rape? Someone is raped, and how do you feel about that?
I don't like it. No, yeah, the question was, What about rape? How do we feel about if a woman is raped and a child is conceived? What about that situation, right? And that's probably the most common circumstance that's provided in defense of some sort of legalization of abortion, right? Rape, incest, and then life or health of the mother are the three that we usually hear. And I want to be really careful because I cannot conceptualize emotionally or intellectually what that experience must be like for that woman. I don't want to minimize at all the very real trauma and pain that she's experiencing and she's going to experience for the rest of her life, regardless of if a child is conceived or abortion, no abortion. There's going to be pain forever. She's not going to be able to forget what happened. And I also don't want to overlook the very real likelihood that that child will remind her of that event. I don't think that I could safely argue that she could look at that child for the rest, if she has the child, she could look at that child for the rest of her life or the child's life and not, at least occasionally, be reminded of how that child was conceived and have the accompanying pain and trauma come back. So I don't want to minimize that in any way. But we do have to take a step back and think, as a society, what's the best response to this tragedy? First, obviously, is to prosecute the criminal, prosecute the perpetrator, obviously. And then we say, if a life was conceived in this manner, what value or what protection does it have, if any? So, one of the key questions that I think I would ask is, let's imagine that this woman conceives a child. And let's imagine that she has a child is born, and 2-3 years down the road, this woman is still reliving that event every time she looks at her son. Her son looks like him. Her son has some of the same mannerisms, or something reminds her about this rapist every day. And every day she relives it because of that. And the pain is real, and the pain is overwhelming, and there's health effects that it's having on the mother. There's depression. She can't love this child because all she can think of is the rapist. Do we think that changes the value of the child in any way? Meaning, do we think that it would be okay for the mother to say, I can't do this anymore, I can't look at this child, I can't look at my son and live like this. So, my suffering is tied to my son's existence, my son's life. The only way to relieve that suffering in any way, maybe not completely, but in any way, would be to take the life of my 2 or 3-year-old son. Do we think that that would be morally okay? I mean, do we think that it's ever morally okay to take the life of another human to relieve our suffering, no matter how real or powerful our suffering is? And I don't think anyone would say that was okay. We wouldn't, we'd be careful because we don't know what the suffering might be like for the woman, but regardless of the depth of the suffering, we wouldn't advocate that it'd be okay to take the life of a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old boy for reminding the woman of the rapist. But the same people that say that's not okay might say, prior to birth, pregnant woman, as she's going through this, every time she's reminded of her pregnancy, every time she has morning sickness, every time she feels the child kick, is reminded of how the child was conceived. That causes very real pain, very real suffering. And we would say that woman should have the right to abort that child. And I would say that's fine. If the child is not a human, if the child is not alive, or if the child has some morally significant difference between that 3-year-old in the hypothetical example that we would protect and what the child is right then in utero. So either the child can't be human or alive, therefore it'd be okay to take that life. Or the child might be human or alive, but there's something different about it that takes its value away. And I don't think that either of those things are true, because one, regardless of how the child is conceived, it's still a living human being. It's growing, it has metabolism, it's consuming energy, it has the ability to reproduce at a cellular level, 20 up to a certain point, obviously. It's alive, it's human, because two humans create a human. The DNA structure of that organism is human DNA. So it's human, it's alive. And I also don't think that the differences between the 3-year-old that was conceived in rape and the unborn child that was conceived in rape are morally significant, meaning every difference really comes down to a few things. It really is a difference of size. It's smaller, obviously, but size isn't really that morally significant, right? Because I'm not the biggest guy in the world. I weigh about 85 pounds, right? I'm pretty skinny, right? I'm not that big, but that doesn't mean I'm more or less valuable, right? So it can't be that. It also can't be level of development, meaning it doesn't have brainwaves yet, or doesn't have a heartbeat yet, or it doesn't feel this or pain yet, or it's not self-aware of its existence. It hasn't reached that point of development. But I don't think that really is very significant either, because are newborns less developed than 4-year-olds, and are 4-year-olds less developed than 15-year-olds? Absolutely. But at any point in their development, do they ever reach more human value? Do they ever gain more human value just because I'm 12 instead of 5? I don't think so. It's also located in a different place. It's obviously in a different environment, but if I go from here to here, does my value change? Does who I am change? No. My rights don't change based on my environment. And lastly, obviously, it's dependent on its mother. More so than we are. Some of us might still feel dependent on our parents, right? We're in college and we feel pretty dependent, but we're not dependent in the same way. We're less dependent than a newborn is, or than a child in womb is. But does how dependent we are impact our value? Meaning, if I'm diabetic and I depend on insulin, a pump, or a shot, whereas maybe some of you don't, does that mean my greater dependency lessens my human value or my human rights? I don't think so. So really, we can't kill, a 2 or 3-year-old child conceived in rape, and I don't think we can kill an unborn child conceived in rape for the same reason we can't kill a 3-year-old, because ultimately it's a living human being, had no control over its own conception, and there's no morally significant difference between it and the 3-year-old that we all agree we should protect, right? It's smaller, it's less developed, it's located somewhere else, and it's also more dependent, but those aren't morally significant differences between all of us, or a 4-year-old, or an unborn child. So I realize that was a long answer and I touched a lot of things, but it's a really important issue and I think it matters. And I think it's an excellent question because it is a very real tragedy that women experience. But what's the best response we have as a society? Prosecute the perpetrator, support the woman, and protect life. What else you guys got? Go for it.
As soon as a child is conceived, most situations say whether it's a consensual sexual relationship, you don't necessarily know that you're pregnant as soon as you're pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you believe that taking a Plan B pill the morning after or morning after pill or whatever, do you believe that that is abortion? Do you believe that that's moral?
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I'm just getting over a cold, so it's a little bit an issue throat. But I'm just saying that because I don't really want to answer your question. I'm just so yeah, his question was, obviously when a woman becomes pregnant, regardless of the circumstance, she's not going to immediately know, oh, I'm pregnant, and now I have a child. That's not how it goes, obviously. And the question was, what do we then think about Plan B type pills that the woman might take, the next day or a couple days after she thinks she might have gotten pregnant. So I think that the answer to that question ultimately comes down to answering a really important question first, which is, what is the unborn? Meaning, from the moment of conception, what is that thing? Because what that thing is determines what we, or how we should treat it. If I want to kill something, what it is matters. If I want to act recklessly towards something, what it is matters. Meaning, if and this is a really popular example, I didn't come up with this, but imagine that you are doing your dishes at your home, and imagine you have a child, and you are facing out the window, out the kitchen window, doing your dishes, and your child comes up behind you and says, "Mommy, Daddy, can I kill this?" And you don't see your child right now, so you have no idea what's in that little boy or that little girl's hand, right? All I say is, "Can I kill this?" Would we apply a blanket permission to say, "Yes, go ahead"? Or would we first say, "What do you have in your hand?" Because that matters. If it's a bug, if it's a spider, do it. Get rid of it. I don't want it, right? I realize some people might not agree with that. But generally speaking, we would say, that's okay. If it's your cat, that's a little frightening. I would probably put that child in therapy immediately because that's scary. That's a sign of things that might come. If it's their sibling, also concerned, right? Scary. So what the thing is really matters. And I think with Plan B, what we have to know is what is that thing that we're trying to end? Meaning, if Plan B could take a zygote and in that pregnancy, unnaturally, what has happened? Has a human life been lost by an intentional act, whether she knew she was actually going to, if she's pregnant or not, that act was intentional, was a human life actually lost? It depends on it, yeah, it depends on if I call it a life at that point or not. Exactly. Is it a life? And if I want to know if it's a life or not, what field of study would I probably turn to? I wouldn't turn to philosophy. Philosophy is not going to tell that. I don't need to turn to religion or the Bible or some other holy text. I'd probably turn to science, and specifically I would turn to embryology, meaning what is this thing? Is it alive or not? And when we turn to embryology, we don't find division in thought on this topic. We find division in how we should treat the thing, the zygote, the embryo. What value does that thing have? But we don't find division on what it is and whether or not it's alive. If you go to embryology textbooks that are taught around the country, they'll say things like, also don't want to misquote someone, like Keith Moore in the Developing Human Clinically Oriented Embryology, 7th edition, 2030. He says, a zygote is the beginning of a new human being. Not very much discussion there. A zygote is the beginning of a new human being because its DNA is human, it's growing, it's consuming energy, it's reproducing, it's alive. Scientifically, it's alive.
What about if it's still at its cellular form, just like how you were speaking of earlier when you were talking about the cellular form of your skin? You know, that's still at its cellular form.
Yeah.
Just like that.
So it can be alive like my skin cells are,
Exactly.
but there's a difference between a living cell, a skin cell, that's a part of a human organism, and a living human organism. And you'll notice that what the embryology textbooks all say is, from the moment of conception, a zygote is a living human cell, part of the mother, part of the father, part of something. Instead, what they say is a new human organism has begun, meaning it's a whole human at a different stage of its development, meaning it's now self-directing its own development. It's internally driving its growth and its development. Unlike a skin cell that cannot function alone, a human organism has the ability to do so, meaning all it needs is time, and it's going to be a human. Skin cell, if I plug a skin cell and I leave it here on this table, if I leave that there and somehow stays alive as an individual cell for 10 years, is there going to be a human there with no intervention? Probably not, right? Because that's not a human organism. if we take a zygote, put it in an environment that's conducive to growth, just like we all need an environment that's conducive to growth, what will happen in 9 months, a child will be born, but it didn't become a child at birth, it was a child from the beginning because it was a self-directed human organism. It was a zygote, then became an embryo, or a fetus, then became a newborn, then became an infant, a toddler, a teenager, an adult, an old person, right? It's just a different point of the same human life. That's all it is. It's a new organism. And I totally forgot what the original question was. Sorry, so did I answer what your original question was?
I don't know, it might have been the way I asked it, no, not really.
Okay.
I guess what I was asking more so is, does a woman have the right to take a morning after pill after she has sex? Or in the same context, the question is really asking, does a woman have the right to choose whether the boyfriend uses a condom or a husband uses a condom, or just doesn't, finish inside of her? The question is more so, does that woman have that choice? Because if you take away abortion, there's a lot to that. Because if somebody makes a mistake, somebody accidentally, finishes inside of that person, that woman, then her freedom is now taken away from her. And if she doesn't have a route to take, then that's her life. If she's a college student, in a secular nation, you are allowed to have sex, you're allowed to do these things, it's not against the law.
Yeah.
If this person does that, does things that are completely within their right and moral, it's moral as far as they're aware and as far as they're concerned, then who is the nation to take their right away from them? That's them to have the right that they claim to have.
Yep, that's an excellent question. So, does she have the right to do what she's doing? First of all, yes, obviously she has the right to choose to have sex with a partner. Like, we're not disputing that. But does she have the right, if an unintended pregnancy occurs, or the risk of an unintended pregnancy occurs that she does not plan on, does she have the right to seek an abortion or to utilize Plan B that could end the life of a zygote after it's begun? Does she have the right to do that? Yes, she has the right. Legally, she has the right to do that in this nation. So I don't dispute that. But can we do things legally in this nation, or have we been able to do things legally in this nation that we should not have been able to do? Meaning, is the law the determiner of moral right and moral wrong? I don't think any of us think that it really is. And I think that we can find easy examples, and I don't want to be super stereotypical. We can find examples throughout our history or world history where things have been legally okay, and morally wrong. Slavery, the Holocaust. The government says you can do this thing. You can take African Americans from their homes, take them to another continent, enslave them against their will, and that's within your right. The slave owner was within their right to do that, legally, secularly within their right. Were they within their right to do that in a human rights sense, meaning in a larger moral sense? Were they actually within the right to do that? And I think hopefully we'd all agree that they really weren't within their right to do that. They did something wrong because they did something wrong against another human being that didn't deserve that to be done to them. And when we think about it like that, we say, I can advocate for you not to be able to do something that you right now have the right to do if that thing is morally wrong, if the government or the courts have made a mistake in allowing that to happen. And when we make this argument that, well, she has the right to choose, I'm not disputing that we have the right to choose. Everyone has a right to choose where they go to school, who they marry, what job they pursue, what career they pursue, where they want to live, who they want to date. All these things, we have a right to choose. But that right to choose is not infinite. Meaning, there are things that we as a society have to agree, we can't let certain people, or we can't let any people, do certain things. Meaning, I have the right to choose right now to attack this guy. What's your name? Eric. I have the right to attack Eric. I have the right to choose to do that. Does my right have consequences? Absolutely. I have the right to choose that. And as a society, we've said, if Trevor chooses to do that, first of all, he'll probably lose that fight. But, regardless of who wins or loses, he did something wrong by attacking unprovoked Eric. wasn't self-defense or anything like that. Eric's been very nice during this whole thing. He's looking through his phone though, I think he's distracted. I don't think I'm holding his attention very well. No, but, sorry for calling out. The ability to make a choice with my body and do something is there, but as a society we said there are certain things you choose to do, there will be consequences. We don't agree that you should be able to do that, and one is violating the rights of another human being. Meaning I have the right to my security as a person, as do all of you. If I violate that right, then I've done a wrong against a human. If abortion does not do a wrong against another human being, then that is a right that a woman has that should not be taken away, and that should not come with consequence. But if that right does a wrong, harms the security or the safety or the life of another human being, then it is wrong. Whether the law permits it now or not isn't really the core question. It's obviously important to talk about, but the core question is, does it do something objectively and morally wrong? And for us to say, well, she has the right to choose, therefore it's not wrong, is assuming that it doesn't harm another human being. It doesn't harm a person unjustly. But it's doing that, assuming that without proving it. It's doing that without proving that it's not a human that's being harmed, or that it's not alive when it's being harmed, or that it is different than a toddler in a morally significant way. It's doing that without proving those things that it must prove for it to be true. Yeah?
Okay, I have one.
Is your arm like tired?
It's
Like,
a little tired.
you're like switching,
yeah.
so it's a workout, free of charge.
So the Plan B pill is essentially birth control. What it does is it's a high dose of birth control. It gets to the egg before the sperm gets there, basically. So it's not an abortion pill, which does exist, but I'm just saying it's different. Plan B is essentially birth control. It's not killing anything yet. It's preventing the pregnancy from even happening in the first place.
So what
I
happens?
misunderstood what you were saying.
What happens if the sperm and egg have joined, form a zygote, and someone takes Plan B?
Plan B doesn't work. Plan B, an abortion pill would, but Plan B does not work once conception has happened.
Okay.
It's like taking, if you could be like being pregnant and taking a birth control pill, it's not gonna prevent, you know what I mean? It doesn't do anything. Also, I just find it, I think it's ironic that, I mean, I know you kind of made it in a joke type of way, but that if all life, every single life from the moment of conception is important, but killing a spider or a bug, like that's life. That's life, right?
Yeah.
And I know you kind of like said it in a joking way, but it's like.
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. I really do. Life applies to multiple species. Life applies to multiple organisms. You know, things are alive that are not human, obviously. So I'm not saying life in itself has the same value across species. I do believe that humans have inherent value that is greater than other species' inherent value.
I guess I disagree with that. I think everything that's put on this earth has the equal right.
No, that's great. So I don't find a lot of discouragement with that view, because that means that I'm going to protect a spider with the same energy that I'm going to protect everyone else, and I just hope that the unborn are included with the spider.
I just think it's human ego to think that I'm better off than a spider or.
I'm pretty egotistical
or a
about
dog. I mean, yeah.
I don't deny that. I think I made myself. So. No, I don't have much of an argument with that without going into more of like a religious argument. And people can make an argument without going to religion, but I would be very eager to lock arms against abortion with someone that agrees that spiders are just as valuable as humans, as long as we don't say that spiders are just as valuable as humans, but for some reason an unborn child is less valuable than a spider. That's the issue, because a lot of times people claim like, oh, the plants are alive, the spiders are alive, the ants are alive, the birds are alive, humans are alive, we're all just part of this one big life, and all life is equal, all life should be protected. That's great. But why are we picking up and removing the unborn child from that? What is so different and what is so regular about the unborn child that it's less valuable, less unique, less important, less worthy of price and protection than a spider? And that's the trouble that I have. It's not that I don't think spiders respond to humans, but that's not the point of discussion or disagreement I have that's really powerful. The powerful disagreement I have with some people, I don't know if this is what you think or not, is that sometimes when people make that claim that all life is equally valuable and equally deserving of protection, for some reason this one exception is made, and I don't think it's proven very well. I don't think that it's defended well that spiders are valuable, but unborn children are not. And that's the trouble that I have. And I don't know if that's what you're arguing or not, so I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I've done this, several times, and that's usually the way that people end up going.
I'm pro-choice.
Okay.
Which is,
Yeah.
sitting here saying like, oh yeah, all life forms, I just said that, but I am pro-choice.
Yeah, so that's the trouble that I have, is I have a hard time, I have less of a hard time seeing the value in a spider than I have a hard time understanding how someone can argue that spiders are about as valuable as humans, but unborn humans are not as valuable as spiders. That's the intellectual dilemma that I really struggle. And honestly, I really struggle. I'm not trying to say anything rude or anything. I really struggle to understand how that argument is made, I guess.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. I will come to you. Does anyone have any other? I don't want to have, just because I've talked to you a couple of times. Does anyone have any other questions? Yeah.
I have like a tricky scenario. So, say like a woman goes in for, like, to see if how the baby's doing, and they tell her that like it's a water baby, it won't make it through the pregnancy, or like it won't survive more than like a day after birth. Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah. So her question, if you couldn't hear, was, let's say a woman's pregnant, she wants the child, or maybe she doesn't. I guess it doesn't really matter for this scenario. She goes to the doctor, and the doctor says, oh, there's something really wrong with this child. Some development issue is wrong. The brain's developing outside the body, or the lungs aren't developed, whatever the issue might be. This child is not going to make it. If the child even makes it to birth, you're going to give birth to a child that's going to die minutes, hours, days, a week, maybe later. What do we think of that? I think it's horrible. I can't understand intellectually or emotionally the pain that would cause that mother and or that father. But you didn't make this argument, but the argument was then made, well, in that case, I think abortion should be at least permissible, right? Maybe we wouldn't push an abortion, but we'd say, you have a choice to make now. This child isn't going to survive. And I think the trouble I have with that is that I think an assumption is being made when an argument like that is made without being proven again. Because if I transplant that example from unborn child to born child, the argument doesn't really hold up. Meaning, let's say you have a child, everything appears fine, as often happens, and a few weeks down the road, a few years down the road, doesn't matter. Oh no, they have something wrong with them. They have a few weeks, a few months, a few days to live. There's nothing we can do. I'm so sorry, this child is going to die. Do we think that the impending death of this child, however certain it is, somehow devalues the humanity of that child? Meaning, now they were valuable when they were born. Now that we found out something's wrong with them, and their death or a severe disability, lifelong disability is imminent, or likely imminent, now their value has changed. Would we say that about a born child? And we wouldn't. We'd mourn that, it'd be a tragedy, but we would never say now that 2-year-old is their value is so reduced that their life becomes disposable in some way. We would never advocate for that, because ultimately, no matter how close someone is to dying, or no matter how disabled they might be, their life is still valuable as a human being. And I think the assumption that's made when that argument is used to advocate for abortion, the assumption that's being made is that the unborn child is not human or alive like the born child, or it is, and there's some significant moral difference between the unborn child and the born child. But the point that's being made, the assumption that's being made in that argument, is not at the same time being proven. Meaning they're saying if the child is something really wrong with them and they're going to die, abortion should be okay. They're making an assumption that it's not like the 3-year-old. But when did I actually argue that it's not like the 3-year-old? When did I say it should be okay? Because they're not human because of this reason, or they're not alive because of this reason, or the differences are so significant that it's not at all like the 3-year-old. When did I make that argument? And I didn't. I assumed it, which is called begging the question. I'm assuming my conclusion in my pregnancy without proving it. And if we push to say, why is a 3-year-old or any of us so different? What is the moral difference between us, the 3-year-old, and the unborn child? It's not that it lacks humanity, because it has humanity. Scientifically, it's human. The DNA structure is human DNA. You can't deny that. It's also alive. It's consuming energy. It's reproducing. It's growing. So it's a living human. So the size matter? Does what stage of development is that? Does that matter? How dependent it is? Does that matter? I don't think so. Because if those things matter, that puts a lot of us at risk. Some of us are more dependent than others. Some of us at different stages of our lives were less dependent than others. Some of us are bigger or smaller than others. But we're all equally worthy of life, of protection, of value, right? So I don't think that there is a difference between the 3-year-old who has weeks to live and the unborn who has weeks to live, or months to live. And I think they both deserve protection. And I think people should live until they die. And no matter how close they are to dying, it doesn't give me any more right to prematurely expedite that death.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So if a child, if you are pregnant and like anyone said, that you know, if you go to the doctor will let you know of any issues that you have with your child, Down syndrome, anything that's abnormal, out of the norm. Now we want to make, you know, the best decision possible for that child. I know you said no matter how close to death, you would not heal. But okay, what about a kid that is suffering and the mother who knew that this child would be born with this disability, and now not only is the child suffering, but the mother is suffering with that child.
Yeah.
So do you feel like this is what, you know, a parent should go through with her child, or do you feel like the suffering of the child and the mother is more important than that the child being, you know, relinquished from that suffering?
Yeah. So that's an excellent question. In case some of us couldn't hear, the question was, well, you go to a doctor, they're going to tell you if they notice something wrong, and they're going to try to set your expectations. This is what the child's life is going to be like. This is what your life is going to be like. You're going to have to quit your job or hire someone to watch over them full time. They might not survive to age 1. They might not. If they do, they're going to be in a chair or hooked up to machines. They're not going to be able to talk. They're not going to go to school. They're not going to live a normal life. Your life is now going to be consumed in this child. Your career is over potentially, or you're going to have to pay so much money to still have your career that it might not be worth it. So that's their job. They should set your expectations. So then, would the mother be doing something just by saying, I don't want to put anyone through that suffering. I don't want to see my child grow up and live that life. I don't want to suffer myself, obviously. None of us want to suffer, right? Some of us like super stoked, like, I'm going to pursue suffering. But most people aren't like that. Most people want to avoid pain and suffering and trial, if possible, unless it's for a tremendous good. So would it be just for to say, I'm going to relieve this child of the impending suffering they're going to experience if they even survive? And I know it sounds a little like a broken record, but I think there's still an assumption being made in that argument that hasn't quite been proven yet. Meaning that argument would never be made about a born child. Meaning if a child developed a disease or a disability or something happened to a car or something that no one could have saw coming, and the doctor says, hey, your child has this issue, or your child developed this issue, or this thing happened to your child, and they're not going to be able to work. They're going to be hooked up to a machine. They're not going to be able to talk. They're not going to have a normal life. You realize you need to quit your job, or you need to hire somebody to watch over your child 24/7 or put them in a home. Here's what your life is going to be like. It's forever changed. Does that in any way say, I'm going to relieve my 1-year-old from the suffering that they're going to experience? They haven't yet been able to even grasp the suffering that they're going to experience. So I'm going to relieve them of the entirety of it. They haven't even lost anything yet because they don't have a family or a job, or they don't have dreams or desires yet because they're so young. So I can actually prevent them from ever feeling that pain by taking their life now. And would I be doing a just thing by doing so? Even if it didn't even benefit me in any way, would I be doing an okay thing? And I don't think as a society we would say, yes, that's okay, because I think as a society, the moral understanding we have of life is that your degree of suffering doesn't give anyone any more right to end your life. Even if they think that they're doing so as an act of mercy, they are taking something from you that should not be taken from you, right? So I think that if that's true, and we agree on that as for born children or born adults, if we're going to argue that that exact same circumstance, disability, disease, impending death, or suffering, that exact same circumstance somehow applies differently to the unborn child, then there must be something inherently different about the unborn child that means they are not like us. And that has to be proven.
So you're basically saying that you're comparing the disease of an unborn to the disease of a born and seeing if we will do the same exact thing? Is that what you're saying?
I'm comparing the disease of a living human being that's in the womb to the disease of a living human being that is outside the womb, and saying, why can we treat them differently? And that's the struggle that we have to work through, is what is the difference between those two things, living human beings, one's here, one's there, that says you can't kill that one, you can't kill this one for the same reason. The circumstances being the same, both living humans, what's the difference that says that's protected, this is not? That's the challenge. We're going to have time for one more. Sorry, I've been talking a lot. I'm going to have time for one more because I picked on Eric. I'm going to have Eric ask the last question. But I will hang out for a while afterwards too if you didn't get a chance to, or I didn't answer a question adequately. I do welcome you to come and talk to me, and I'll do the best I can. So, Eric?
Okay.
Grand finale, man. Let's hear it.
Okay. Well, first, I am pro-life. That's who I am. But I do like your arguments previously about kind of like parallels. Like you have the unborn, well, the embryo, the fetus, they're forming, well, still a child, but forming like, okay, so he or she can either have dying or you get to know have a disability. And you have, born child who probably has disability. My viewpoint on this is, okay, so for people who are, who want an abortion, I say, what exactly would it matter? What if your child, or what if a child, was born with a disability? Will this value diminish to you? And for the already, like, let's say you're like a 3-year-old child, basically, what's the difference? Like let's say, even if the child dies, does it matter with abortion? Because it might die, but at the same time, when it, comes out the womb, there still might be a possibility of that life being, like of actual life. But also, actually, I had another point, but I forgot it. But I did like our argument about.
Yeah, and I think it's a good argument. You made it, but I think it's a good argument because what he was talking about was what are the abilities or the disabilities that someone has? What do they even matter? And I think that's really powerful, because if we really get to the point where we say someone's abilities or lack of abilities or circumstances or ability to do something, perform some function, impacts our worth, our value, or our protection from the state or society. We're in a pretty scary place. And I would draw back to Abraham Lincoln. If you ever want to like cite somebody who's like really powerful, like that's a good one to go with. Like anything Abraham Lincoln, pretty, people are gonna have a hard time speaking that. So I'm gonna go back to Abraham Lincoln because when he was talking about slavery, he knows the same thing. He says, "Oh, you say the color of someone's skin is the basis for the value they have." I'm obviously paraphrasing, but you say it's the color of skin. Well, you're in a very precarious spot when you meet someone with fairer skin than your own. Meaning, I'm not the most pale person in the world, I'm pretty close, but I'm not the most pale person in the world. So if I would argue that those with darker skin are less human and less valuable, therefore can be or should be enslaved, like would be argued in the 19th century and prior, then what happens when I meet someone with fairer skin than my own? Is my value now get lost? My value get diminished, and now they have the right to enslave me because I have darker skin? I'm not saying that happened. Like, I don't want to trivialize it or anything, but the point that was being made by Lincoln at that point was these are all just arbitrary differences between us, right? They don't impact our value. If I was born with no legs, and people say, "Oh, that life is too hard for you," but if you were born with one leg, it'd be okay. You're getting into a situation where you're on this weird spectrum of value, and where's the line get drawn? Some people have less debilitating disabilities. Some people might have a learning disability. It doesn't really impact their life that much. Something they have to work through, dyslexia, something like that. Not the same as not having any arms or legs, but if we're really focused on disabilities, we're really focused on the ability to perform some function, we're in a risky spot when we say that impacts our value, because the dyslexic will say it's legs that determine value. You have no legs, oh, you can be aborted for that reason. The person that doesn't have dyslexia will say, oh, I don't draw the line at arms and legs, or organ function, or life expectancy. I draw the line at learning disabilities, and now the dyslexic is in that group. So it's a pretty, can lead to pretty scary outcomes if we start putting emphasis or value, tying that not to who we are as individuals, as human beings, but we start tying value to our ability to do something or our lack of ability to do something. So, just to kind of wrap it up, like I said, I'll hang out for a few more minutes after this, but I do want to kind of challenge you guys. I realize we have a mixed crowd in here, and what I really want, if people don't walk away with anything else, I want you to do two things. One, I want you to really, really think about what the unborn is. Meaning, we talk about choice, we talk about abortion, we talk about life, but sometimes we miss really focusing in on what abortion actually is. Who are the people involved in abortion? We know the woman, we know the doctor, but who is the other person involved? And are they a person? Are they a human? And if they are, that should impact how we feel about abortion. If they aren't, that should impact how we feel about abortion. So it's a really important question. But then, I want you to find a way to get all the apathy you have about this issue and dispose of it. Because I don't think there's a lot of room for apathy on this. Because, like I said in the beginning, either I'm advocating for taking away human rights from women across the world, or I'm right to think I am, and there are people out there that are advocating for the legal termination of life. And I think those are things that cannot be true at the same time, and they're things that are pretty significant injustices. Either I'm stripping rights away or lives are being lost. And we don't want to be the people that wait around and let either one of those injustices go on. The apathetic 80% of the population, that's a rough estimate, not scientific in any way, but I feel like there's very passionate 10% on each side of the issue, and the rest of us are somewhere in there, in the middle, not totally engaged, not really considering it, not really doing anything. I really want to challenge you guys to get more crazy. get more towards the peripheral, get more towards the extreme where you are advocating for something and you really know why you're doing it.
Hopefully
And you
not a
believe it.
radical extremist.
What's that?
Hopefully not a radical extremist on either side.
No, we don't need to be violent, but we should be passionate and we should be engaged, right?
Yeah.
So I thank you for your time, for having me. I'll be around for a little while more, but I highly agree with you.